Hey, this is Boran Doulos with the Creative Ache Podcast, where we discuss the God-given passion, pain, and purpose for the creative individual. Hello and welcome to the Creative Ache Podcast. I'm your host, Boran, and I am a multi-instrumentalist, singer, songwriter, and composer, as well as a musical intercessor at the International House of Prayer in Kansas City, Missouri. I have several music albums under varying artists and genres available wherever you stream music. And with this podcast, it's my desire to encourage and exhort artistic people to faithfully steward their God-given creative ache. In this episode, we are going to explore the parable of the talents in Matthew 25 and how it relates to our creative abilities. Using the metaphor of the master and the servants, we will see how God has given us each unique talents to steward and how important it is for us to use them for His glory. We will also discuss the dangers of hiding our talents and not using them to their fullest potential. Through this parable, we will be challenged to think about how we can use our creativity to serve God and make a difference in the world around us. So I'm excited to delve in with you to this world of artistry and discover the rewards of being a faithful steward of our God-given talents. Before we get into this episode, I have something really fun and exciting to share with you. I've been working on a new project and I haven't released much detail at all, but this Friday I'm going to be releasing a special episode of this podcast that is exclusively to give a first listen and insight into this new project that I've been working on, and I'm super excited to share it with you. It's something I haven't done before, and I think it's going to really bless you. So make sure that you're subscribed to this podcast so that you know this Friday when that episode comes out. And you will be among the very first people to not only get a first glimpse into what the project is, but you'll even get the first listen. So let's jump into this episode now. The parable that we are discussing today is found in Matthew 25. And it's from verses 14 to 30. Now, I'm not going to read this set of scriptures, but just know that this is often referred to as the parable of the talents. In this story, there is a master, and there are 3 servants of his. And in the parable, he gives them what we call talents, and these are large sums of money. And he's leaving on a trip, so he gives some of these talents to each of these servants, and he gives them all a different amount. The first servant, he gives 5 talents. The second servant, he gives 2 talents. And the third servant, he gives 1 talent. And it says specifically that he divides the portions up according to their abilities. Now, the first 2 servants, when the master had left, went out and invested the money or made it grow and doubled what they had been given. But the third servant dug a hole in the ground and buried his bag or his talent in the ground. When the master returned, he praises the first 2 servants for their faithfulness and their wise stewardship of the money that he'd given them. But he rebuked the third servant who buried his treasure for his laziness and wickedness. Now, how does this parable of the talents relate to the creativity and artistry in you and I? Now, firstly, this parable is often interpreted as a call to use our gifts and our talents or our abilities for God's kingdom. And the talents, or the bags of money, represent our abilities, our resources, our time, and the master, of course, represents Jesus. We are the servants, and we are called to use our gifts and our resources to advance God's kingdom. And as creative people, this parable speaks to us in a unique way. Now, I'm going to pivot for just a second to clarify what I mean by creative people. Now, I've been asked by some, if they think that this podcast will be helpful for them on the basis of them not being, quote, actual artists. Of course, what they mean by that is they don't paint or make music or draw or write stories. But I have a really firm conviction and belief that creativity is not just those common expressions that we often associate with it. In fact, I believe that creativity is the essence of who we are as mankind, made in God's likeness. Creativity is natural to us, and we all function in it to some degree, just not always in those specific ways. For instance, if you're in business or you're an entrepreneur, starting a business requires creative thinking, problem solving, innovation. Designers like web designers, interior designers, or designers of any kind, you're using creativity to design something that is efficient or beautiful, and you must balance practical considerations with artistic expressions to create these things. Even things like cooking and baking, or parenting and family management are extremely creative things. So when I say that this podcast episode speaks to creative people in a unique way, I simply mean people that are functioning in their unique God-given creativity. So I do believe this is for you. We have all been given the gift of creativity, whether it's through art like painting or music, or any other form of expression that I just described. And just like the servants in the parable of the talents, we are required to steward our creativity and use our gifts faithfully and wisely for God's kingdom. Jesus was very intentional about the way that he described the master and the things that he gave his servants. What he gave us, he expects to have a return on investment for. He's given us charge or stewardship over things that came from him. The faithful servants did not have the talents to begin with, but they had unique abilities, and the master gave them the talents that worked with their abilities. And because of their faithfulness, not only did the master get a return on his investment, but he abundantly and exceedingly rewarded those faithful servants. They earned something that they could not have had in and of themselves just by stewarding what wasn't theirs in the first place. And I believe that it's very important for us to view our creative gifts in that same light. God is the creator of all things. In fact, nothing we do creatively is new or novel. It's just a new spin on something that already existed. When he made man in his likeness, he gave us an ability like his own to be creative within the parameters that he established. And he wants to see us function in that creativity wisely, faithfully, and fruitfully. And he rewards that faithfulness abundantly. So what does it mean to invest or use our creativity faithfully and wisely? The answer is actually relatively simple, but not short. There are a lot of ways, and it first of all takes prayer and communion with the Holy Spirit to know how specifically should you function as a creative person with your unique gift set. But in general, it requires that we use our gifts to honor God and serve others. It means using our talents to bring beauty, truth, and goodness into the world. And it means using our creativity to spread the gospel and build up the church. However, just like the third servant who buried his talent in the ground, we can be tempted to hide our creativity within ourselves. I believe that the picture of that servant burying his talent in the ground is a reflection of hiding our creativity within ourselves. Adam, in the beginning, was made of a combination of the breath of God and the dirt of the earth, the ground. In fact, his name, Adam, means from the ground. And we can be tempted to hide our artistic expression within ourselves for various reasons. Maybe we're afraid of criticism or rejection, or we doubt our abilities. I can certainly relate to this. I'm only just now discovering how often I've actually tended to withhold and restrict my creative abilities because I'm afraid of criticism or rejection. But when we do this, it's not as simple as just not doing what we wish we could do. Instead, we need to view it as a matter of faithfulness. When we hide our creative abilities, we are not being faithful stewards of the gifts God has given to us. And we see by the way the master approached the servant who buried his talent that he views this aspect very soberingly and importantly. When the servant buried his talent, he said that he was afraid and he knew that the master was shrewd. I believe this was true, but when the master confronted him, he actually said that it was because the servant was lazy and wicked. In my own life, I have seen this play out. The sense of fear that I have wrestled with has been the thing that I feel like I'm seeing and the thing that I'm feeling. But when I really get down to the bottom of it, by the grace of the Holy Spirit, I can actually see that it's a lack of willingness to put forth the effort. And the effort includes overcoming that fear. You see, it's just a matter of choice. Am I going to do the creative thing or not? And I can do it whether I'm afraid or not. Being afraid isn't the thing that actually stops me from faithfully creating. The only thing that stops me is my choice to not be creative in the first place. And that, of course, is also called wickedness by the master, because ultimately he's chosen to do something for himself out of self-preservation and self-interest, as opposed to what the master actually requires of him for what he had been given. So how can we overcome fear and insecurity in expressing our creativity? Again, first and foremost, we need fellowship, regular and constant fellowship with the Holy Spirit. And as creative people, we need to remember that our gifts are not just for our own benefit, but for the benefit of others and for the glory of God. We need to be willing to take risks, to put ourselves out there, and to use our creativity in ways that honor God and serve others. When we do this, we'll see the same kind of reward that the faithful servants in the parables received. The master praised them, saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things, and now I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness." Now, something that's noteworthy about that is to go back to what I said in the beginning, that the master only gave the servants talents according to their abilities. The master did not judge the servants according to how much they produced. He judged them according to whether or not they were faithful. The master came back to one of his servants having 10 talents and another one having 4. That's less than half. But they got the exact same extravagant, abundant reward because they were 100% dedicated to going all in with faithfulness to the master that they loved. And the servant who had 1 talent, the same reward was available to him, but again, it came down to a choice to not be faithful. So how can we be faithful stewards of our creativity? Again, firstly, we need to recognize that creativity is a gift from God. It's not something we've earned or achieved on our own. When we view our creativity in this way, it becomes easier to see it as something that we need to steward well. Secondly, we need to be intentional about using our creativity for God's kingdom. This means asking ourselves how we can use our gifts to honor God and serve others. It means being willing to step outside of our comfort zones and try new things. Thirdly, we need to be open to feedback and critique. This can be difficult, but it's essential if we want to grow and develop as artists. We need to invite others to offer constructive feedback on our work because we can learn from their insights and improve at our craft. Fourthly, we need to be willing to take risks and try new things. This might mean stepping out of our preferred medium or genre or trying a new technique. When we take risks, we may fail or make mistakes, but we can learn from those experiences and grow as artists. My final point, and the one that has maybe helped me the most in this recent season, is that we need to be disciplined about our creativity. This means we need to set aside time to work on our craft, even when we don't feel inspired or motivated. It means regularly practicing and seeking out opportunities to learn and grow. A practical way that I do this is I aim to make sure to spend every single day creating music of some kind. And on weekdays, 5 days a week, I schedule in specifically 90 minutes of time that is devoted to non-distracted songwriting. I've been doing this for about 8 months, and I haven't been perfect at it. But in this past 8 months, I've written more music than I think I've written in maybe the entire time that I've been in Kansas City since 2015. So setting aside or scheduling specific time to work on our craft, on our creative assignment, is essential to faithful stewardship. So in closing, as a fellow creative, let me encourage you today. Don't hide your gifts in the ground. Don't be afraid to take risks, try new things, and use your creativity for God's kingdom. When we steward our creative gifts well, when we honor God and serve others through our artistry, we can expect to hear those same words of praise from our Master one day. Well done, good and faithful servant. I hope that you enjoyed and were blessed by this episode of The Creative Ache. Again, I want to remind you that this Friday I'm releasing a special episode to give you a sneak peek into the project that I've been working on. You'll be the first to hear about it and to hear it. So make sure that you're subscribed wherever you're listening to this podcast, and make sure that you share this with any other creative people that you know that you believe will benefit from the things that we're discussing on this podcast. It's almost been 2 months since I've released this podcast. In fact, March 11th will be 2 months to the date. And as I look right now, we've literally had 198 downloads since I started this podcast. So my hope is that over the next few days, we'll get those last 2 before crossing the 200 download mark. Thank you so much again for listening. You can follow me on Instagram at Borandulos Music. That's a great place to keep up with other things that I'm doing creatively. And otherwise, I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Creative Ache podcast.